Welcome, everyone. I see we have a nearly full house. I think you're probably not here to see me, but luckily we have a better guest. I'm Michael Govan, LACMA CEO and Wallace Annenberg Director. I'm so happy that you're here this evening. The last time I was on this stage, I was with Walter Isaacson, and we were discussing the original Renaissance man, Leonardo da Vinci. Today, we're going to be discussing the other Renaissance man, Cheech Marin. I think you all know him. We're going to start in the list tonight with art collector. He's also an actor, director, writer, musician, and humanitarian. But he is, we all know him. He's a cultural icon born in South Central Los Angeles, right? In my notes, it says when he was in Canada, he was a political refugee during the Vietnam War, which is where he met Tommy Chong and formed, of course, the iconic duo Cheech and Chong. He did come back to Los Angeles, thank goodness for all of us. And of course, 4 of their 6 albums were nominated for Grammys. And he had a long career, obviously, in film as well, in television. Everyone here knows Cheech. He's also the author of children's books. And recently, he published his memoir, Cheech is Not My Real Name, But Don't Call Me Chong, which was released in March, and I was able to read recently. And he also reads the audiobook, which I can highly recommend. But tonight we're going to talk about Cheech mostly as an art collector, an incredible advocate for Chicano art. He began collecting in the mid-'80s, developing what we really know as the finest collection of Chicano art, which is one of the finest collections of American art and one of the finest collections just of art. So we're going to talk about that. I met him through our exhibition, his exhibition here, Chicano Visions, American Painters on the Verge, which toured 15 cities in the U.S., broke attendance records at most of those cities for exhibitions. That was between 2001 and 2007. I was lucky enough to be here when Chicano Visions was here, and we adjusted the show to be a little more LA-centric. It was very exciting, and of course, one of the most exciting things was that I got to meet Cheech. You know, so many exhibitions, dozens and dozens and dozens throughout the country has been mounted since then and include work from his collection. In our own Carlos Almaraz exhibition, 4 works from Cheech's collection. And I should note that Howard Fox, the curator of that, I think is here tonight. And that exhibition, Carlos Almaraz, Playing with Fire, is an amazing show we're going to talk about. And then we will talk about his upcoming partnership in Riverside for a new museum, but I'll leave that to the conversation. You know, he has made it his goal to bring the term Chicano to the forefront of the art world. He is doing that and doing much more, and we'll talk about that tonight. Please welcome Cheech Marin. Thank you, Cheech, for being here. It's really great. So the occasion for this is the Carlos Almaraz exhibition, but I want us to talk about some other things.
Okay.
So we will do that. Here you are in all your glory. When we presented your exhibition here at LACMA when I first got here, and it was so exciting. And I guess that was a little bit of a homecoming for that exhibition.
Well, yeah.
It had traveled the world, and yet, for some reason, its LA venue had been
put off. Or, well, you know, it was harder. You think that the LA would be the first city to show the show, and in fact, it was the last. And it was a long journey, and you know, you really run into kind of the whole spectrum of the museum world and your travels, and you learn how to navigate that at that point. Right now, we've played this collection in over 50 museums since then. Since then, and you know, thank you. We played it all the way from the Smithsonian to Odessa, Texas. You know, I mean, Odessa, you can see your dog run away for 3 days, man. It was like flat.
it was really exciting here. When we had the show here, I asked you to give it this LA focus because I was trying to build an image for LACMA as this place, destination in Los Angeles. You know, you go to Venice to see Tintoretto and Veronese and Titian, and I had wanted this place to become that place you would go to see Carlos Almaraz and those artists. And I mean, I know the movement, of course, is broad, and you have artists that are from all over California and Texas, but it does seem that the LA strength is really there. I mean, well, East LA.
It was born and raised here. This is where the Chicano movement started, and art movement started here and in San Francisco and in San Antonio at the same time, but the biggest center was here in LA. Carlos Almaraz was the instigator of the Los Four and the first Chicano collective of artists to come and say, we have a significant and unique school of art here that we're being ignored, but we won't be ignored for long because the art is so good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it was. You know, it was interesting to kind of play LACMA at the end, and everybody, you know, there's always kind of all kinds of pedo for the Chicano community. That means bullshit. And because the LACMA represented the establishment.
The establishment. See, I'm the straight guy in the suit.
When in fact, LACMA has shown more Chicano exhibitions than any museum in the United States over its, you know. And that was especially when you came, Michael, it brought in all the communities who have kind of been ignored or pushed away and brought them back into the fold. And it was really a unique moment in the history of LACMA, and I was really appreciative of it. Thank you very much.
Well, you know, it was interesting because we have shown a lot, and we have shown more and more and more because the art is great. But there was a time when that wasn't true, and in the OSCO exhibition that Rita Gonzalez curated here, there was that famous picture of Patsy, and the LACMA was, of course, tagged.
Yeah.
Because...
In Chicano tradition, you know?
In Chicano tradition. Now, I'm quite proud of that, but what it did is we were tagged because we had not.
Yeah, exactly.
In those days, in the 60s, and it was a strong statement. But what it was equally strong was that it was LACMA where the work needed to be shown, right?
Yeah.
At the center, in the establishment museum.
Absolutely.
That was key.
That was very key. I mean, we're in a city called Los Angeles.
Right.
You know, where almost 70-something% of the population is Latino on one side or another. And there was a disconnect in here that we weren't kind of being given any shelf space, not just in LACMA, but in any place, you know. Right. It was, and so I knew that the art was great because I had seen good art all my life. I'd gone to museums since I was 11 years old. You know, and LACMA being the foremost. You were taken in a little group of mono-colored T-shirt kids, you know, holding hands, and you see them every day, and okay, you know, this is art, huh? Boy, well, they sure kill a lot of people in this art, man. You know, but that was the impetus for me learning about art because I was raised Catholic, and in South Central, this church that I went to, St. Stephen's. And you know, when you're a kid, you go through the mass, and okay, and you look up at the ceiling, and look at all these paintings, all these guys in robes, and why are they barbecuing that guy? You know, well, I like art, you know, it's edgy, and it was edgy, you know.
Well, it is cool that our first work of our Chicano art in a museum was to be tagged. Yeah. And then, of course, we have shown so much since, including this exhibition. Okay, so that story about you visiting museums since you were 11 is in the book. There are many things I learned in this book, not just about Cheech, but about life. It is an excellent, also, self-help book. Yeah. I can highly recommend it. Am I promoting it enough? It's a really great.
You're getting there.
I'm getting there. You learn things like if necessary, he knows how to skin a bear.
Yes.
Now that's just one of the many.
Do I hear a challenge?
And there's a whole story leading up to that in the book. One of my favorite chapters. So there are so many things in this book, and hopefully everyone here will rush out and
buy 10 copies apiece.
Buy 10 copies apiece because. And in the end, it's you have that beautiful chapter about your art collecting. So I want to ask you, because the chapter actually on the art collecting is a little small. I think there should be a volume 2 of the book just about your art collecting.
I'm thinking that
right?
same thing
Because
too.
that's been a journey of reflection.
Yes, it has. It has been a wonderful journey. I started collecting Chicano art in the mid-'80s, '85, and I started, I was a perfect storm. I knew what the art was because I had seen good painting all my life. I had the money to collect it because I was gainfully employed for a bunch of years, and I had the celebrity in order to promote it. And so I started going around and trying to, all my friends, when I put together enough of a collection, they said, you got to show this. Oh, okay, well, how do you do that? I was just looking for something green to go over the couch. That's really where I started. And then, my collecting mania took hold. And so I looked around for, it's easier said than done. Hey, I'll just tour this thing, and it'll be great, man. It was from the inception of the first thought of it to the point where LACMA joined up. It was 10 years. 10 years, and that's looking for funding. And I did my little Donga Pony show in every corporate boardroom in America, from General Mills to General Motors to the Army. The Army wanted it because they were the #1 employers of Chicanos.
And they had already bought all your records, so they needed something new.
I almost did it just to piss everybody off, like, how do you like that shit? But we started touring the show, and it was like all of a sudden, immediately out of the bag, it gained momentum. And the first thing we had to do is overcome the use of the word Chicano. Right. Because all the museums, every single museum didn't want to use it, because for them it was this divisive term that really separated not only the rest of the nation, but Chicanos themselves. And so we decided to open the show in San Antonio, Texas. That was the other great center of origin of Chicano.
Still
art.
is.
Still is. People, great art comes out of there. And so I was like, and also I was getting a lot of feedback from the Chicano academic community, all these PhDs in Chicano studies, and the attitude was, who is this guy, this doper comedian coming here to tell us what's up with Chicano art? And that was not my intention at all. My intention was to show Chicano art, because, and my argument for every museum that I went to, well, why should we do this? I mean, because museums don't want to show private collections. And I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that why they don't. And so my line was, well, I have this collection because you don't. And
That's good, right?
There was no comeback. Oh, well, okay, and it's contextualizing the thing in an image that they can understand. One of the good examples is there was this painting called by Wilshire Blvd called "Kill the Pachuco Bastards," and it depicts the Zoot Suit riots. Do we have that on? Yeah, so we'll get to it eventually. Okay. And it's very graphic, and there's this big rape scenes going on, and people are getting knifed and killed and everything. And so we put it up at the Smithsonian, which was, I think, the second venue that we played. And the curator said, I don't know if we can do this painting because it's pretty violent, and there's a lot of kids, going to be coming through there. So and so I thought, well, every major museum I've ever been in has some version of the rape of the Sabine women. Yeah. It just depends on whose ox is getting gored here. And when I put it in those terms, they understood it. Okay, here's the Modigliani of the group. There's the Govan of the group. And then from then on, I had a narrative in order to come in. And what was proved great is that we broke attendance records, like you said, in just about everything. In the Smithsonian, we did almost 1 million people. And that was they got a lot of competing museums in that town, And so we were very happy to do that, and it just kept on going.
So let's actually go through, I think a lot of people here in LA and here, of course, know this work, but you selected some slides that include some of your favorites. So I wondered if we could just go through some pictures, and
sure.
You can, because I haven't asked you about the particular stories about how you got to specific paintings and artists. So maybe we have some slides here of some beautiful works from the collection just to talk through.
Okay. This first one up here is Chas Bojorquez. It's called Chino Latino, and it comes from an area where the East LA and the Latino community overlaps with Chinatown. and there was competition for space on the walls. And so Chaz, who was trained in calligraphy, I mean, he went over to China, studied calligraphy, and he started doing these images where these traditional Chinese dragons along with tagging, and it was Chino Latin, and it kind of made peace with that seam that ran along that neighborhood. And it was the first move to integrating both of those neighborhoods, which the people wanted to do. Powers behind you, they do, and the traditional powers behind didn't.
Well, it's funny when I mean, first coming to Los Angeles and looking at how to define LACMA. That Mexico, Asia is the frame, right? It's the frame of reference, and you can look at this work and you can see that. We sent our Chinese ceramics recently to East Los Angeles College, to the Vincent Price Art Museum, right on the border between those neighborhoods, and of course texts in English, Chinese, and Spanish, and it was it's an amazing thing about Los Angeles and that identity.
We like it or not, or agree with it or not, or we live in a multicultural society, and we are better off for that. So, and I've always stuck to that principle.
Right. I think, and I have to say, in Los Angeles, is that it's that multiculturalism, which in earlier times, even in New York, I say it's that it was the melting pot. Everybody had to lose their identity to become something else. But it seems like we are now celebrating the fact that we have this incredible multiculturalism in this place, and that's a strength, not a weakness.
It is a strength. I mean, I was just in Houston last couple of days, and Houston, like Los Angeles, their school system encompasses 128, 130 different languages in their school system. So if that is not the definition of multiculturalism, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and that's our strength. Yeah. Here's the great Gronk.
Gronk. He can just put paint on canvas, man. This guy is just. This calls a return of La Tormenta, I believe. It might not be. Yes,
La Tormenta.
I remembered something. And Gronk is an LA painter, came from East LA, was one of the founders of the group Asco, one of the...
which we showed.
Asco in Spanish means nausea. And why did you call your... Because every time they put up their work, they say, estos pinturas me da asco. And they make me say, yeah, that's right. You get an asco from our group. And it was kind of a more punkish element that it entered right after Los Four. And so this is a big painting. I don't know how much... What is it, 12 feet?
It's a big painting. It's even bigger on screen.
Yeah, cool.
You said something in the book about your physical reaction to paintings, like in your this visceral sense that you had as you would encounter these works earlier even than you started collecting, correct?
Yeah, because I've been looking at paintings all my life, going to museums and you have to see paintings live. You have to see them in person because the texture and the quality of the paint is this whole other category. It's like, they're finally lit and they're alive. I'm of the belief that paintings are alive, and they emit this low energy hum. It's like quantum physics, It changes you every time you walk by there, whether you want it or not, for good or bad. But there's this hum that walks. That's why I surround myself with art. Every house I've ever had is like, it's chock-a block with art because I like the hum. It makes it feel
that
good.
When I was at your house. I felt the hum.
It is,
and other things.
I had during the building of this collection, I lived in a little house that had no walls. It had a nice beach view, but no walls, man. But now I live in a big house. Oh, this is a nice one. This is George Yepes, Axis Bold as Love, and this is a big painting. I think it's, I don't know, 12, 14 feet tall. And it's really good. George is a really, really good painter, and he paints these wonderful Madonnas. And
this painting channels so much of like that turn of the 19th to 20th century energy, obviously, of the...
It's Chicano muca,
More than that.
I love this painting. This is the wedding pictures in Hollenbeck Park. Anybody knows Hollenbeck Park, which was the central park in East LA and the Chicano community. And, it was kind of typical scene, but it's really aspects of Millet's The Highway All you need is a big haystack, or the Angeles, a big haystack over here, and it'd be Malay. And that's another aspect of Chicano art. All the artists in this collection are either university and or art schools trained. They're not folk artists. They're not naive artists. They're not, those kind of. They reference all international art because that's what they were exposed to, and Chicano art and Mexican art, and where it comes and it collides with American pop, that's what determines what Chicano art is. And it's in constant motion, it's in constant evolution, it's an evolution as we talk right now, because that whole community is changing, and it changes all over the country. I was just in Topeka, Kansas the other day, and there's more Mexican restaurants in Topeka, Kansas than there are McDonald's.
Yeah. It's amazing. No, I was in Kansas City recently. It's universal that, in some ways, Chicano art is the most American art.
It is the genesis of the biggest movement in art today. With the one we just saw, the Chino Latino from Chas Bojorquez, tagging and tagger art and that kind of mural kind of art started here in Los Angeles, and then in the ensuing years, it was picked up by a younger breed of Mexicans that were coming back and forth between Mexico and the United States, and then Central Americans were coming back and forth, and they dug it. It was rock and roll as opposed to, in the more establishment, older European-based Mexican painters, and then it jumped across and went into South America and became street art. And that is the biggest movement in art in the world today. You cannot drive from any airport in a major metropolitan city to the city without seeing it on both sides of the highway as you go in there. And it's a language. It's a language that's being spoken, a visual language. And it's not a definite interpretation, but it expresses the mood of what's going on with those people. But it's all over the world. And all these artists now are going from El Paso to Berlin to Tokyo to Buenos Aires to back to El Paso,
Yeah, that's true. And what's nice about there's the muralism, the art in the streets, but then in your collection there are also so many of these images of Los Angeles or places.
What's great about this one is it has all these classical references, but you got a freeway going on in the background there. It's like on the top,
Enough of that impressionism in south of France. We've got now Hollenbeck Park and the freeway, which is much better.
I like that. I love this painting.
I know this is one of your favorites.
It is, because I like, this is like St. Stephen's watching the guy get barbecued, It's by the late Alfredo de Batuc, and it's called The Welcoming Committee. And I grew up off the corner of 36th and San Pedro in South Central LA. And City Hall was right down the end of the block, and it looked just like that. And it would curve in the smog, and it was all black community. And so I was a little Chicano in both of them. So it was always kind of tense out there, like there was a lot of stuff happening. And then when I was 10, we moved from South Central, everybody was black, to Granada Hills, where everybody was white. The next day, there was no kind of transition period,
Which is well told in the book also.
It was tough. And my dad was a policeman, LAPD, 30 years, so we were right in the center of it.
You, of course, revealed in the book that you also wanted to be a policeman.
I don't know, in a weak moment.
Another great gem in the book, but there's a whole story around that.
The last thing I wanted to do was be a policeman, because I seen what that life entails.
And here we have almost a fauvism.
Yeah, this is the closest to Govan that Chicanos are going to get. But this is by Margaret Garcia, and it's called Janine at 39, Mother of Twins. And if this is not the picture of fecundity, I don't know what it is. This is this beautiful, lush woman in the middle of these agave and nopal cactuses. It's in our bedroom. My wife and I is in our bedroom, right next to the bed. So, kind of a little prompt there, I guess.
Inspiration.
You get the picture, honey? Okay. This probably is my favorite picture in the painting in the whole collection. This is Wayne Healy. It's called Un Tarde en Meoque, and it's the town where his wife is from in Mexico. And you can't photograph this well because the paint is very thick and laid on, and it's a cross between Norman Rockwell and Jackson Pollock, you know, because all those lines that you see, those thick painters, were put on after the main image was drawn, and in like ketchup mustard bottles full of paint, and you stood over the canvas and shh, like that, and you can't go back on that. You can't wipe it off. Oh, let's try it again. And this is so the technical skill, and you know, it's all on the wrist that it requires to do that. And it's
one of the many amazing things about having your show here and looking at all that work was to realize this idea of color. I mean, there's probably never, even Impressionism is kind of, I think, timid in terms of its use of color, and whether it's complementary color, this sort of the arrangement, the lines, the risk-taking in color. In the whole history of art, I think is almost unmatched in terms of that here.
Well, that's the Mexican part.
Yeah,
you know.
I know.
It's
out of something that's innate.
Innate. I mean, it is really that Mexican influence where the El Chicano painters consciously do that when they're painting, but it is in their DNA to do this. And it was amazing because the review of the Carlos Almara show in the LA Times, Christopher Knight, he talked about the process of color and how the intoxication of color. And I really, the color is intoxicating, you know, it really is that lushness, and especially with these lush paintings that, like, you're so saturated and piled on with thick paint, and they're alive, and you know, you're better off for it.
I mean, obviously there are many forms. If there's no one form of Chicano art, which we should say, there's not even one theme. There are artists without color, there are in their paint, there are, and I think you say that too, it's definitely not a style.
No, it's not.
So unlike most of these movements, which we try to name due to style, and you write about that, you know, a lot of it began as you know, the name political or more protest art or political in that sense. Quickly it morphed into something else, but to this day, it's one of the most complex isms we have because it's not stylistic. It includes all these different forms. It is traversed territory of all of art history.
What Chicano art does, as I've observed it over the years, it is an explanation and a feeling of the community. You get the sabor of the community, the taste of it, and you put these collection of artists and artworks together, and you get this 360 of what the community feels like, and really what it tastes like, what it smells like, and that's the thing that comes off of the canvas, and that's the thing that informs this school, and it's not stylistic. They don't paint like expressionists or impressionists or minimalists or anything, although it has all those. You know, but it is an explanation of a community, so you get the flavor of it because it's multi-directional. This community is multi-directional, and it is constantly in evolution.
Like any label, a lot of the artists also rebel against it. Sure. Almaraz wanted to distance himself at one point in the 80s from that because you don't need the label to confront the work. Yeah. And yet, I think there is something to the way you've assembled this sense of something through the collection, right?
Yeah, that's, you know, because I'm of the persuasion that the only analogy is like being an actor in Hollywood. I mean, a lot of Latino I just don't want to do Latino parts. You know, I want to play Cyrano de Bergerac or Hamlet or something. Well, cool, go ahead. You know, I like playing Latino parts because there's a lot of them that haven't been told yet, you know, and I'm delighted to do that. So you can have, you know, whatever area you want to go in, but I'm really happy describing this community.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many different voices within it. There's an explosion of possibilities. That's what was clear in your show. There's no one way of looking at it.
No one way, but there's like no one way of looking at it Chicano, you know, because Chicano is a voluntary category. You have to declare yourself a Chicano in order to be a Chicano. You can't go to the census and tick off a box that says Chicano because it doesn't exist. But you can get a PhD in Chicano studies from Harvard University.
Or UCLA.
So what's the message? We exist, we don't exist. My cousin, Ray Jean Castro, I'm going to brag about him right now, he was the first PhD in Chicano studies from Harvard University. And he was in our little group. I came from an anomaly of a little blue-collar, working-class Chicano. My dad was a policeman. My uncles were all upholsterers. But the kids were really high-achieving academics, and we challenged each other. That's how I learned about art. I was assigned to learn about art by my cousin. Okay, you learn about art and bring it back to the thing. You learn about medieval history. You bring it back. You learn about music. And that's how we educated ourselves.
Right. Well, and you, as you said, you were really well self-taught in art history. By the time you started collecting, you knew more than most collectors would ever know.
I knew a lot about classical art, up into modern, the modern art, and then the gap in my knowledge was contemporary art. Yeah. And so I started going around to galleries in the west side of Los Angeles. My wife at the time was a painter, so she was kind of guiding me, and that's when I discovered these Chicano painters, and I knew what good painting was because I'd seen it all my life. These painters are really good. How come they're not got any shelf space? And so then the journey began.
When did you first see John's work?
Oh, John, right away. I think John was one of the first pieces I ever bought. This is John Valadez, and he's one of the OGs of Chicano painting. This one's called "Getting Them Out of a Car," and this is a pastel. And pastel crayons are very imprecise instrument, and he does photorealism in these, and this is just unbelievable.
Yeah, they're they're in the school of photorealism, and yet they're utterly abstract in so many ways that they're just uncanny because they are and they aren't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's typical Chicano. It's like every painting comes with a 3-bedroom addition. Kind of. I love this painting. This is Patsy Valdez, one of the members of OSCO from here in L.A., and it's called "Little Girl in a Yellow Dress." And this painting is going to be remembered for a long time. It happens in a junction in her life where her kind of world is coming apart, the divorce of her parents, and you see that everything, it looks just like a typical little girl about to go to Sunday Mass, who's got her Sunday best on with her little white gloves, but her world is cracking, the pavement at her feet is cracking, and everything is at an oblique angle, and you look at the little girl's face, now it's a grimace instead of a smile, so there's two messages being told here, and it's just and so I saw this. It was she had a show at Northridge at Cal State Northridge, and I got the catalog, and boy, these are really good. I called her, because I had already bought a couple of her paintings, and I said, Patsy, do you still have these paintings? She says, yeah, I still do, And so I says, you still have that little girl in your yellow dress? I goes, yeah, it's still here. I said, because that's a great painting. He says, yeah, I know. And so we began our relationship that way, and I put this on the cover of the Chicano Visions book.
Yeah, which is beautiful, and people saw it. It was an icon in the show for sure.
A beautiful painting.
Do you want to talk about Los Four a little?
Sure. Los Four. Sounds like a gang, huh?
Yeah. Well, it is, sort of.
It was a gang. This is one of Los Four, Magoo. Gilbert Lujan is called Magoo. They call him Magoo because he used to get up close to paintings and look at them and like really, really closely. He wanted to see how they did it, how they put the paint on. And there was this cartoon character, Mr. Magoo, and he was blind, and he wasn't really blind, but Chicanos have a nickname for everybody. And so how do you think I got Cheech? It's short for Chicharron, And so he was Magoo, and Magoo is like the Aesop of the group. He has these anthropomorphic characters, that are funny. This little blue trickster here, and his pet boy, But this again is a pastel. Yeah? The sense of humor. There's a sense of humor that comes out of Chicano art, and all the time. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's very blatant, but there's a sense of humor. Kind of expresses our outlook of life, there's a good dollop of humor involved in that.
Yeah, which we can get to in Almaraz, where we are, that kind of light and dark quality. I mean, just speaking of Los Four, so you have Frank's work, of course. This brings us right to LACMA.
Yeah. This is Kienholz. At Kienholz, he had this, it was an installation.
Yeah, we just had this Ed Kienholz backseat Dodge that this painting refers to was just on view in the Resnick Pavilion in the Virginia Dwan exhibition because it had gone through her gallery. And this is the famous work of art that nearly shut down the museum because there were complaints that it was too racy and not appropriate, and the supervisors wondered whether we should shut down the museum, and the trustees had to stand up and say, no, we have to keep this work on view. And it was resolved that the door would be closed until somebody asked for it, and then the door would be open, which of course created lines around the block, and it was one of the most popular, famous exhibitions of an artwork in LACMA's history. And of course it has this great history, and here it is being redone by
Chicano style
Chicano
by Frank
style.
Romero. And it was good. I mean, who else but a calavera or a skeleton would be with this girl here in the Chicano vision, So it is a wonderful, and everybody that's involved in the museum world, especially curators and historians, we got to have this one, man, because it references something that they know, and backseat Dodge, because always the assumption is the Chicanos lack sophistication, and it's not an unusual attitude that I've encountered over the years. You get no credit for sophistication. In fact, the Chicanos come from a cultural background, Mexican, that's extremely sophisticated. Cultures from all over the world. We just do it elegantly. You slip it. My message has always been to slip it in their coffee. So you get the effect, but you don't get the wanginess of it, man. But this is called Backseat Dodge by Frank Romero.
All right, so now we have to talk about our hero of the day.
Look at this.
Carlos Almaraz. And here is this painting on view, 1982, Echo Park, which is in 4 pieces, which are, this is the first time since it was in the, is it the first time since the studio that it was put together,
like that.
Howard? Where's Howard?
Something like
1987 it was. Since, okay, so 30 years ago was the last time that this was put together as a totality. It's in the second gallery at LACMA. When you walk into the Almaraz show, you're sort of stunned by color. You look down through the next doorway, and you see this magnificent, epic painting. Of course, you can't help but think of it in terms of maybe Impressionism, Monet. Our Giverny is, of course, the lake in Echo Park. It's just a magnificent. It stopped everybody in their tracks that has walked through those galleries.
Yeah, as it should. I mean, this is a masterpiece painting that stands. It can stand on the stage with any world-class painting, and that's the kind of attitude that I try to foster with touring the shows. Chicano painters can stand on the stage with anybody. Some resistance, and then you start opening the crates, and then no resistance. That's really what it took to overcome that attitude in San Antonio, where the academic community like, who is this guy? And they started opening the crates, and this painting spoke for themselves. And then I was standing in the loading dock when the crates came in, and there's just a couple guys unloading, and then one curator, I think so. And they started taking the paintings out. Oh, that's kind of cool. And then you see people leaving the loading dock, and they're gone. And then they would come back with more people. And pretty soon, the whole staff of the museum was in that loading dock. And at that point, Chicano art changed. It was accepted into the mainstream of the art community. Not, it wasn't going to play the. Well, it did play the Smithsonian the next day, but it was, it was overcoming that myopia, I would think,
Yeah.
It wasn't prejudice. It was just myopia.
This, it's funny that I've sat with this painting now for so long. I remember looking at it, and I was, in of course, the architectural details are real. You can feel that place, and if you look at it, it's lighter on the right side, and you get to night. If you think about how Monet would paint in time, the Rouen cathedrals or the haystacks, and he would bring a canvas out and paint different times of day through the sunset change. And I had this realization of that maybe this was morning and that was night, so he was painting it through the day. Of course, Howard had already written about that, so my discovery was a little bit flat. But it does so many things that other paintings don't do.
No.
And that light and darkness, the kind of that goes from light to dark to night, that aspect of the light and darkness, even emotionally, seems to be in all the work. Sure. This is the famous crash in phthalo green.
This was the first painting that you had in your office when I first met you.
That's
walking
right.
off. This was on the wall. He very first came here.
Yeah.
And you can have any painting in the whole
That's right.
collection. And this was the painting he has. Oh, this is my guy, you know.
And he was relentless after that. No,
Yeah.
it's true because I had a chance, so I looked through the database, and I had these were the paintings I knew in New York were the car crashes because they were so powerful in terms of their, this imagery of this brightness of the color, phthalo green, pinks, blues, and of course it was a car crash. Yeah. So, and quickly I saw that crash, that element of the spectacular is also a metaphor for painting. Right, it's the way, the speed with which he's applying the paint, and it's layered and layered. It is almost a performance. You have to get it right to the point of that sense of a crash, something that is explosive in its color and feeling. And these paintings, when you see the exhibition, you see how many different car crashes there are. In fact, this is yours with a completely different feeling. The sunset crash with the multi-layered, multi-tiered highway that.
Carlos Almaraz, for me, is the John Coltrane of contemporary painters. He puts paint on canvas with a spontaneity and a discipline that would seem at first to be antithetical to each other, because he can put it on fast and layered and free form, but there's a discipline, and you can see it's almost like a skeleton or a structure or a grid underneath it. But these paintings evoked really, emotions. When I was a kid, there was this freeway went from downtown LA to Downey, and twice I saw cars go off of the top thing. I saw them, it was like, boom, bang, right on the nose, man. I was scared to death to go on a freeway as a little kid. Every time I went on the freeway, I was like, I don't know. Let's get off this freeway, man. But it kind of, expresses, gives vent to that feeling of, almost like an agricultural enclosure movement where country people were forced into a city situation and the friction that it creates when they're believers. And this was a perfect metaphor for it.
So we sat in my office at that time, and you had your exhibition, and we discussed even then this idea that you had the Chicano visions, but now it's important to take a single artist and create that retrospective treatment that an artist would have in art history. And it was you who said it has to be
Carlos Almaraz.
It has to be.
He was kind of the first, and he was the philosophical leader of this group. And there were, Chicanos are strong personalities, let me tell you, and they're individual. And I'll give you an example of it. When we were in San Antonio, when we put the show on, it was a huge show, and the community kind of was divided between the old academic Chicano OGs and the young painters who just wanted to have their work shown, and so there was a lot of commotion going on. Opening night, it wasn't helped by free tequila and beer, And so I said, in the midst of all this turmoil, I was backed up against a rest of the palateros by this group. Where's all the political paintings? Well, right there is one of them, And so I saw this was going on. So I said, all right, tell you what, tomorrow morning we're going to have an open forum here at the museum, 9 o'clock, which canceled half of those guys out. 9 o'clock, anybody has anything to say, show up and say it. And so everybody did. And on the dais was Carlos, was John Valadez, Patsy Valdez, Linda Vallejo. Linda something Vasquez. Anyways, and the staff of the museum was there, and in the audience was everybody that had a grudge. And so the conversation went back and forth, and this and blah 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 blah. And so at the end of the conversation, this older lady who looked like she had seen everything Chicano in the history of the world stood up and said, I have a question for John Valadez. Okay? And if there's any OG Chicano painter, it's John Valadez. So he says, considering everything you've heard today, do you still consider yourself a Chicano painter? And John thought about it for a minute, looked up and says, only if it bothers you. John Valadez became my hero that day, and he remains my hero to this day. Because that is the attitude, Ike. I don't know you.
It did take longer than we originally thought to do the show. Luckily, Howard Fox was able to work with us, and I think did an incredible job of research, pulling together over many years. So a hand for Howard. Many years of work went
He also
into
did the
this.
Gronk show here. There was a
That's right.
mid-career show of Gronk, which was a wonderful show. Man.
So we're very grateful. And of course, he went to you to borrow 4 paintings, your works, including this 84 work, which is so beautiful and
I
crazy.
love this one. You know, I just like them. They're a little edgy and like, what is that? And Carlos Almaraz really represented that. Like, what is that? Is it sexy or is it scary or is it scary sexy? Or it's both. Yeah, that's what I like it. You know, it's like, you know, I like that stuff that invokes that. This is the California natives, and there's that saturation of color. You know, the explosion of color and that palette that's so Almaraz. This one here, California. It's a big painting too. I like. I like big paintings. When I first started collecting, I quickly realized that this is only going to do me any good if this is a museum show and we can tour it and everybody can see that. You know, so I started collecting large paintings, and sometimes I never even saw them in person. I knew the artist's work from other paintings, and I saw a slide of it. Okay, I bought it and sent it to storage. You know, and it wasn't years later that I saw it for the first time. Some of the paintings I saw for the first time in a museum. You know, you go there, and it was one of my greatest thrills of every time we played 14 venues all over the country, all the big museums, and my most thrilling moment is when all the paintings were installed in there, because every museum installed them differently. My only directive was I want all the artists for their work to be shown together, because nobody had ever heard of these painters before, you know. So I wanted to see John Valadez over here, and then another John Valadez in another room, and I wanted people to get the whole story of that. And I would take my lunch. I had to get a lunch, and I would go into the museum during the day after they hung it, and I'd sit there and have my lunch there by myself, and it was like, this is cool. It's like visiting your kids, you know, and they don't talk back. And that's a great one.
Well, they don't talk back that much in these cases.
Maybe your kids. This is one called Two Chairs. This is a Carlos Almaraz. It's in the show. It's just wonderful the way the paint is put on there, with this spontaneity and discipline simultaneous. And I never questioned, why is there 2 chairs? You know, like, there's 2 chairs. It must be some art thing or something. You know. And a friend of mine, a woman from New York, she came up and looked at the painting. I was hanging in my house in San Francisco at the time, and she said, "You can't sit in 2 chairs at the same time." It became very obvious to me what that painting was. Carlos's sexuality, which he dealt with all his life, you know, and informed a lot of his paintings, you know. So that was that extra edge, you know, that existed there. I was like, this is a beautiful painting.
It's interesting also that you say that nobody had ever heard of these artists. This incredible show, which is being very well attended and everyone loves. When we put it out there to be sent to other cities, I think we tried, Howard, 35 museums, and the answer was, who's Carlos Almaraz? Of course, now that the show is up, and this has happened a few times at LACMA, when you're breaking into a new category. We had this with California Design. Everybody said, what's California Design? And then the show toured 7 venues throughout the world. And so it's interesting, since the show's been up, of course, now we have the inquiries.
Aha.
So
costs you more now.
That's right. The price is going up. Okay. I want to get to where some of these paintings are also going to be long-term. Of course, I just want to note your many books, exhibitions.
Oh, this was a nice show. It's Bordeaux, France, and Los Angeles are sister cities. There's a sister city organization that has, and they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of that association between Bordeaux and LA. So the people from France came over, and they were looking around for something that represented LA that they could take back to Bordeaux, and they came upon the collection and decided that was it. And so we took the collection over to Bordeaux, France, and then other Chicano shows started. There was a big OSCO show, the biggest I've ever seen, and a couple other museums. So we took over the city of Bordeaux, and it was unbelievable. They loved the Chicanos there, you know. We were so exotique. You know?
And you've done many variations on the collection, picked out smaller groups of work that have traveled and been published, like the small paintings.
This is Chicanitas. little paintings. I had my big
It's a little book too.
And it's
It's
a
not
little
like
book,
that
yeah.
size. The book's about this big.
Yeah, and this is the cover by Ricardo Ruiz from Corpus Christi, Texas. And the only reason I know about him, and this is kind of one of the ways that the collection became so well-rounded, is that I travel with Cheech and Chong or this or that or the other. I'm always working, and I have since forever. I go to every city, and a lot of these artists in Corpus Christi, Texas, didn't have a gallery. They couldn't get a gallery in San Antonio. So it's like, so I started seeing their work and I started collecting and putting in the shows, and it started to change. But the big art epiphany I had, and I was making a movie in Amsterdam. Cheech and Chong's Still Smoking. Anybody see Still Smoking? Yeah. Represent. Okay. And so I went to the it was the Stedelijk. No, it was the what's the other one? The Stedelijk and the other one. In Amsterdam. The Stedelijk and the Rijksmuseum. Yeah, it was in the Rijksmuseum. And so, because all the Rembrandts were there, and Frans Hals. And I was like, wow. And Rembrandt, I've seen the Night Watch, Rembrandt's one of the most famous painting in books. And I was like, wow, that's pretty. And you go into see, it's gigantic. It's a gigantic painting. It's like a mural. And I went, wow, I'm gonna get big paintings. We're gonna have a museum, and it's gonna be like this, man. Wow. And so I went and had lunch and had a couple glasses of wine. Was feeling good after I stayed in that room with the thing for about an hour with Night Watch, and so then I came out of the restaurant, and there was a little sign that says Vermeer. This way, a little arrow. Oh, Vermeer, Johannes Vermeer is one of my favorite paintings in the world. And I go down there, and these paintings are tiny. They're like this. They look like postcards almost compared to like. And so, and that day I realized it's what's inside the frame that counts,
So you have big, and you do have big and small, and
Yeah.
you have shown them all over. You've done works on paper shows. You have showed now, 50 venues, something like that. Right?
We've done it in over 50 museums throughout the.
And now they're going to come out. Before we promote your weed business,
yes.
I want to
Come on, let's get to that.
I want to just talk about up and coming in Southern California, the Cheech.
The Cheech, thank you very much.
So you didn't hear it here first because it's out there a little bit, but we're going to hear about it. You've made an agreement with Riverside, with the county and city of Riverside, to renovate an old building.
Yes.
And it'll be in partnership with the Riverside Art Museum and the city of Riverside, and maybe with us a little bit.
Yeah, yes.
We work on that. And you're going to create the Cheech.
It's-
And we're going to be able to see pieces of the collection rotating forever.
Rotating through forever. You see, I'm lucky in that I always believe that if your motives are pure, that good things will happen. And that's what happened. The skies opened, and the city of Riverside came to me and said, we have this historic mid-century new formalism building. It was the town library. It was a beautiful, beautiful building, 61,420 square feet, 420, okay? I said 420, okay. It's a little dog whistle for all you stoners out there. And this is the building, and it's a beautiful, beautiful building. And they said it was a town library, and they're building a new Judson's library down the street, and they have to repurpose this building. And so I said, but we were down the road with the Children's Museum and the Science Museum, and blah, 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 and then it fell out. And then I opened a show of works on paper at the Riverside Art Museum just then. And they go, Inland Empire, 4.2 million people, 52% Chicano. Riverside, 52% Chicano. This might work. And so they came to me and offered me the building to house the collection. And at first I didn't understand it. What, do you want me to buy a museum in your... Well, I don't get that money, man. And you want? No, we want to give you the museum in order to house this collection, to be the Cheech Marin Center for Chicano art, culture, and industry. Trying to figure out the industry part, but but I figured it out.
More on that later.
Chicano ingenuity. At one time, Riverside was the richest per capita city in the United States in the 1880s because of citrus. They grew everything citrus, and they built a railroad right into the middle of the groves with packing houses all along the side, and they exported citrus, and so it was a very rich community, and it still was 52% Latino all the time, and everybody got along. Interesting, and so they came to me with this building and said, we would like to turn it into okay. And when I told Michael about this, he says, welcome to fundraising.
There'll be donation boxes outside the theater on the way out.
Your firstborn children will be gladly accepted, man. But Riverside is poised, and I've been talking to them about this. Riverside is poised to be the next big art town because it's perfectly situated. It's a beautiful city. This museum exists right next door to the historic Mission Inn. That's right next door. And then on the other side is the Riverside Art Museum. And it's in the cultural corridor, the main street of Riverside, which is a beautiful, I don't know if anybody's been there, but it's a beautiful sound. And it's, yay, Riverside. Come on. Give me some there, okay? But it's a beautiful building, and we're going to do everything Chicano, not only just the paintings, but video art, photography, and cars, and collecting other collections, and then we're going to travel it throughout the world, the part that's not on exhibit, we'll be traveling.
And it's worth saying, at the same time that this is going on, you're working with us to build a collection of masterpieces of Chicano art, so that we can, and hopefully we'll have a dialogue with this museum in terms of sharing collections, our collections and theirs. So it's a very exciting thing for Southern California.
It's just a wonderful place to go. And more museums, as more I talk to directors, they're going in that direction, because why have to have the people come to the art museum? It's a burden for them. Not a burden, but it's a stretch, to come from South Central to come here. And why not bring it to them, and that's kind of what you're involved in, and so the collections should go that way, because it's about people seeing the art and being affected by it, not by coming to a building and being impressed. It is about seeing the art and how that art changes your life, because art is the only thing we leave behind as a culture. It's the only thing. It says who we were. It says what our emotions are, what our values are, where our soul is. I mean, there's no museum dedicated to the art of the deal, as far as I know, But after thousands of years, people still go see the pyramids and the Mona Lisa and the Eiffel Tower, and that's what art can do. And I mean, it's the only thing we leave behind.
We leave it behind, but also there's this sense of the present and how our cultural identities, how we express ourselves, how we all get along, right, is partly by understanding we're all creative people, having these collections here to express the essence of an incredible culture, an American culture, more and more Americans.
I've had this T-shirt that we just played the Philbrook in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think it was Works on Paper, and they made up a T-shirt for me. It says, Chicano art is American art. Yeah, and I kept wearing that.
That's right. Which it is. That's what it is.
Chicano is indistinguishable from American culture. It is part of the American culture, just like, the most American thing you can do is sit in front of your giant big screen 72-inch Trinitron screen, watching the Super Bowl, eating guacamole and Corona beers, man. That's essential American, And so they're never going to unweave this, and why should they? They shouldn't. The influence of Mexican culture and Latino culture in this country is inseparable.
Yeah. And growing to be its identity. Okay, so the industry part.
Yeah, I got that.
You've been very industrious recently. In my office right now, this was my gift from Cheech for the work that I had done. So this sits proudly in my office. And then I was like, that's cool, sculpture.
And it has secret compartments.
And then he showed me underneath, and I don't have it here. We were going to put it here to show you. If you open the bottom and you twist it, it's like a bank, and inside is your stash.
Yeah, there we go.
And so everyone walks by this every day, and they're looking at it. And so there it is. In case you need it, you now know.
Those guys.
Where at LACMA to find it.
my guy here.
So,
This is
and
good.
now you're taking it global. So here on the left, is your new businesses, the industry. Well, you have on the right, you have your mezcal business, but we'll get into that. But
Okay.
this is the new logo for your new business, Cheech's Private Stash.
Cheech's Private Stash.
Now to be representing California in the new economy.
Yeah, goes legal January 1st, and it is. God bless America, you know. That's all I can say.
Did you ever think you would see this day that in front of everyone would be your private logo?
My dad
Being promoted by the state of California, by the way, right?
Yeah. My dad was a LAPD 30 years. I didn't know if I'd live long enough to see this. I mean, you know, it was. There's 29 states that have some form of legalized marijuana. It's like Mexicans. It's a lava flow, you know. You can stand in front of it. I wouldn't recommend it, you know, but you can stand in front of it because it's about to change. And I think I haven't heard anybody make argument for medical beer, you know. But there is a lot of examples of medical marijuana that can really help you. I mean, you know, I was kind of, you know, yeah, all right, sure, yeah, that sounds good, like as a salesperson. But you get to a certain age and you start getting nausea for one reason or another. I know everybody's nodding here. Yeah, immediately clears it. Immediately. It's curing it right now. You know?
Also outside the theater, there'll be a sales desk.
But if find dispensaries near you, you can buy tomorrow Cheech's Private Stash.
Okay, since we're on the Renaissance Man theme here for you, and we've had all these conversations about all of this and the mezcal and the stash and the art over these years. And then one day you came in with your instrument, and you were talking about your musical talents. So I think we have here. Do we have the instrument here? Where's
the instrument?
All right. So we decided we would end the talk tonight.
Oh, okay.
You have become, over the last few years, you've been playing a little ukulele. So I asked Cheech if he would
I can
serenade us. This is not usual for the talks at LACMA.
But this is LA and Chicano culture, so you know anything goes. Everybody hear that?
You want me to hold the mic for you?
Yeah, that would be great.
Here,
I tried to be funny tonight, but I'd like to be serious for a moment and sing a song of my people. Mexican Americans don't like to just get into gang fights. They like flowers and music and white girls named Debbie too. Mexican Americans love education, and so they go to night school and they take Spanish and get a B above average. Mexican Americans don't like to get up early in the morning, but they have to, so they do it real slow. Mexican Americans love their nanas and their nonos and their ninas and their ninos. Nanu, nanu, nina, no, no. Mexican Americans are named Chata and Chela and Chema and Little Chema, and have a son-in-law named Jeff. Mexican Americans have been here forever, and we're gonna be here forever, and we only want whatever you think is fair. Mexican Americans!
Thank you, Cheech. And thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here.
Michael Govan is our hero. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me up. Thank you.